Greetings and welcome to episode 25 of Bible 180, 180 days through the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. So as we begin today, we're looking at Exodus 16 and 17, and think to yourself, do you ever long for the good old days? Do you ever look at the current state of affairs or of your life or of your body and just long for the good old days? Do you ever let nostalgia get the best of you and long for a time of the past when things were different or things were better, or just longing for the good old days? That's what the people of Israel did as they wandered in the wilderness. Exodus 16 and 17 is when God provides manna and quail for the people of Israel wandering in the wilderness. And to put that in context, or just to review for a moment, in the first couple of chapters of Exodus, the people of Israel are in captivity in Egypt, under bondage under Pharaoh. You remember the story? Moses goes and says, "Let my people go." The 10 plagues. They finally go through the Red Sea in safety. The waters crash in on Pharaoh and his army. In all of that, Moses believed in God and trusted God. And when God parted the waters and they went through on dry land in Exodus 15, there's a whole song of joy being delivered and sung to God about their deliverance from Egypt. And everything is great. At the beginning of chapter 16, everything changes dramatically. The people of Israel all of a sudden forgot that God had provided for them. And so they started to worry and they started to complain. God had just delivered them from captivity through the Red Sea miracle. And within a very short time, their memory faded and they started to revert to not trusting God. The next chapter, chapter 16, here's the words. "The whole congregation of the Israelites set out from Elim, and Israel came into the wilderness of Sin between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month, when they had departed from the land of Egypt." That means that they had been out of captivity for 6 weeks, delivered by God through the parting of the Red Sea, on their way to the promised land. Going on from there, the whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. They said, "If we had only died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we," listen to this, "sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread, and you've brought us out into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger." And then they said, "We detest this miserable food." That is so awesome. God had delivered. They get this memory that when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread in the good old days, they forget the deliverance through the Red Sea. They get out on the other side, and within 6 weeks they're complaining and their memories get muddled, and they represent the good old days of the past. They didn't sit by the flesh pots and eat their fill of bread. They were slaves. They were given poor food. They worked their fingers to the bone making bricks. Their children were mistreated. God delivers them and brings them on the way to the promised land, and they start longing for the good old days. In their worry and anxiety, they misrepresented the past. They misrepresented Moses and accused him of bringing them out to die in the wilderness. That is so fascinating. Now, they're slaves in chapter 13. In chapter 14, they are delivered through the parting of the Red Sea. And in chapter 15, they're singing songs of joy. Now, at the beginning of chapter 16, they're back to worry and anxiety and complaining and saying, "We don't even like the food we're eating." God had sent them manna from heaven and quail for chicken barbecues at night. And they complained about that food that God had been given them, the manna from heaven, the quails that burst all around on the ground. Nostalgia set in, and they remembered selectively what they thought went on in Egypt. They forgot the bad stuff about being slaves, because that's the way nostalgia works. We forget the bad memories and we don't remember the good. We think of the good stuff that we think we had in the old days. Part of the reason for that is the older you get, the better you were, right? The older you get, the better were the good old glory days in high school. That's the way nostalgia works when we long for the good old days, because the good old days were never really that good, and the current days are never really that bad. However, God was patient with their memory loss. God was patient with their complaining and worrying and anxiety. And remember, God had provided for them just like God always does. Manna in the morning and quail in the evening. Remember what they said when they saw the manna on the ground? They said, "What is that?" And that's the question they asked. And in Hebrew, the word is manhu. Okay, what is that? So they call it manna, which means mahun, which means what is that? They recognized that God was providing for them with food that they didn't know anything about. And God, in doing that, was providing for them solutions outside of their capacity to understand it. Manna means manhu. What is it? They saw scorched earth and worried. God saw heaven's breadbasket opening. They saw the desert and they worried. God saw a whole flock of quail just waiting for them to catch and barbecue. They saw problems and they worried. God gave them provision. They forgot about God. God provided, and God remembered them. And, going forward, that's what we pray when we pray the Lord's Prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. It's so simple. We say it all the time, our daily bread. That bread, that manhu, only lasted for a day. If they wanted over the weekend on the Sabbath to put some in a jar, they could do that. Otherwise, if they kept it, it went sour. And so that's why they provided the daily bread. That's what we pray about, because worry and anxiety about those things over which we have no control breaks our spiritual hearts. Worrying and anxiety over which we have no control means that we don't trust God. God says, trust me. Answer to every prayer. God says, trust me. Do you trust in God enough to trust God to provide? When you pray, give us this day, it says it twice. Give us today our daily bread. It might not be everything you want. I mean, you might want lefse every once in a while if you're a good Norwegian Lutheran, but God gives us everything we need day by day. And if God should give us more, which God often does, that's a matter of grace coming from God's unlimited supply of love and grace. Now, what happens next is fascinating. Exodus chapter 17, I'll read that to you. Then Amalek came and fought with the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some men for us to go out and fight Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the mountain. Whenever Moses held up his hands, Israel prevailed. But whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they put a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on each side and the other on the other side, so his hands were steady until the sun set. And Joshua defeated Amalek and the people with the sword. Now, that fascinating story, because what it tells us about is the first time that the people of Israel were in battle on their way to the promised land. And remember, they began their journey to the promised land as people who had been slaves for a very long time, for 400 years. They were slaves, not warriors. They didn't have war weapons or catapults. They probably had sharp sticks and homemade bows and arrows and maybe some swords that they picked up from the Egyptian soldiers. I mean, they were not prepared for battle, but they were led by Moses, and God had already prepared them for success. Moses' brother Aaron served as representative, as a high priest before God, and Joshua, the man who would eventually succeed Moses, that we'll be talking about in a couple of episodes, Joshua went, and also Hur, H-U-R, went. He was a man that God used mightily to have a great impact on Israel. Hur served in the shadows. H-U-R. Hur served in the shadows, and yet his obedience and his faithfulness was critical to obtaining victory. So notice what happens. Joshua did as Moses told him to and fought against Amalek. Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill, and even though Hur was not a high priest like Aaron or a captain of the guard like Joshua, he's mentioned alongside those who were well known and recognized by the people of Israel. And notice when Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whether he lowered his hands, Amalek prevailed. Moses gets tired of holding his hands up. Joshua and Hur have him sit on a rock. They held up his hands, one on each side, so they were steady until the sun set, and Joshua defeated the attack of Amalek. Now, two lessons I think can be learned from that. The first is that even though Hur was not a well-known guy, he was happy to serve the Lord and to be used in whatever capacity God wished him to serve in. He found his place serving the Lord. He wasn't as well known as Moses or Aaron or Joshua, but he served God nonetheless. God has gifted you, each one of us individually. We all have our own work to do for God, whatever that might be. Maybe we can't all be the music director or a council member or sing in a choir or play the flute, but we all have different gifts. Paul writes about that. We'll be talking about that in many episodes from now, when God says God gifts us individually with gifts that God has given each of you. If God has gifted you with the ability to share your faith, be a witness, be an evangelist. If God has gifted you with prayer, then be a prayer warrior. What Hur did was something you can do. You can find your place in serving God in your community, or I think especially at your church. First lesson has to do with Hur, H-U-R. Find your place in serving the Lord. Second lesson we can learn from this short story about fighting the Amalekites is that when you're facing a situation beyond your ability to handle it, when you're facing a struggle that is just dragging you down and getting the best of you, when life deals you stuff that you know will absolutely defeat you, look up. Okay? Look up. Pray. Look up to God, because that's where you're going to get your help. Remember, the people of Israel were totally unprepared for the attack of the Amalekites coming against them. But God had already prepared them for success against the forces that were coming against them. The odds were overwhelmingly against them, but God had already prepared them for success. Because remember, regret looks back. Insecurity looks around. Pride looks within. Worry looks ahead, but faith looks up. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Regret looks back. Insecurity looks around. Pride looks within. Worry looks ahead, but faith looks up. And if you grow weary looking up, if your prayer life just can't handle another request or difficulty in life, when you're feeling at the end of your rope and feel you just need to let go, then do what Moses did. Let your uplifted hands be held up by someone like Aaron and Hur, a friend, a relative, a wife, a family members. Let someone around you help you hold your hands up so that you don't give up. That's what church is all about. Church is not about the heroes who get all the attention. Church is about the Aarons and Hurs who gather to hold people up when they don't have the strength to do so. Faith looks up, and when we lose strength to hold our hands up, then God provides us with Aarons and Hurs to surround us, to support us, to help us hold our hands up and give us the victory over anything that we might be facing. That's the end of the episode for today, so keep up the good work, make it a great day, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.